In my word for the week this week, I wanted to have a little chat about being asked the impossible, being asked to do the impossible when you really can't, and it's just not reasonable. And the sort of questions that raises in your mind, it's a mystery. How am I going to get through this? How am I going to get round this particular problem? Things happen to you, things come your way, and to know the way through and out of this is just a mystery, and it can be such a load of stress. What's brought this on? Well, today I got to go to one of these event things about the next set of environmental regulations coming in Wales. That's the first thing that's brought it on. And, I've already looked at the nitrate vulnerable stuff and all that from last year. And standing here on this traditional Welsh hill farm where we don't push, where the animals just taken care of gently and the biodiversity is on the up all the time, so much so he'll jump up and bite your leg one of these days. And, you come to a point where you think this is just impossible here. How are we going to do it here? How can it be done? And that questioning brings on a load of stress and pressure. That's the first thing that's brought this on. And the second thing is I'm preparing a sermon preaching in Memorial Chapel in Llandovery next week on Daniel chapter 2. I haven't looked at it in ages, and there's something in there that Daniel has really got to say about this sort of situation. See, here's the score for poor old Daniel. He was a bright young lad, and his country got overrun by a very violent invading army. And he got packaged up with all the other bright young lads and lasses, I guess, in his country and shipped off to Babylon to live under a very violent and nasty king in Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar hadn't been on the throne for long, so he was the new broom, and he was really putting some stick about. And the thing was, these bright young lads, they were put in with the best intellects of the day in Babylon. And the best intellects in the day in Babylon were all concerned with looking at the stars and doing astrology, looking at the innards of animals and trying to predict the future and stuff like that, which for a good Jewish lad like Daniel was a really confusing and alien environment. Now, there came a day when King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and to those people in those days, dreams meant a lot. They were supposed to tell you things that were going to happen or you had to know about. So Nebuchadnezzar sent for his best intellectuals of the day who were supposed to know how to interpret dreams and all that sort of thing and tell the future. And he said, I'm not going to tell you my dream. You tell me the dream and then you tell me the interpretation. It wasn't because he'd forgotten. Basically what happened was he didn't really trust these guys. He reckoned they could just make anything up they wanted to any old time. Possibly that was true, I don't know. But it was something those guys couldn't do. Their skills were to look at what happened in the world and then look at other things in the world around them, like the way the stars were working or entrails of animals or whatever. And they'd associate things they saw in the world with events. So that when they saw those things in the world again, they then said, well, the events are going to happen. And they had masses and masses of research and study and whatnot. Like that. So you had to tell them what you were observing in the world, whether it was animal entrails or a dream or whatever, and then they would try and tell you the future. Now, I don't recommend that. It's a mug's game. But that was the way they had to work. And so when the king said, I'm not telling you even the dream, just tell me the answer, he was asking the impossible. And then being the nasty piece of work that Nebuchadnezzar was, he says, look, you're just messing me about, you boys. You tell me the dream and the interpretation, or I'm going to slaughter the lot of you. Bad news for Daniel and his friends in Babylon there, because they were all tied up with those guys. That's where they'd been put. And they had no way of getting around it or getting out of it. What a nasty situation to be in. It was a nasty situation to be lumped into with something you didn't really believe in yourself at all. Quite the reverse, because they were good Jewish boys. All very confusing, all so many questions, all so much, why God, why, how am I going to deal with this? This is impossible. How are we supposed to deal with this? Yeah, but no, that's not the way it looked to Daniel. When the actual executioner came to the door to take Daniel and his mates and make a short history of them, Daniel turned to that bloke and he said, hey, hang on a minute, let me talk to the king. Now, Daniel wasn't allowed to go into the king. He was supposed to study 3 years before he could go in. He'd only been 2, so this was a risky move. let me go and tell him I got a God and my God's going to interpret this dream. And you know what? Some reason the executioner said, righto, give it a go. Sometimes you've just got to launch out in a bit of faith, and faith in somebody you can rely on. And Daniel thought he could rely on his God, so he did that. Went off and saw the king, and he said, just give me a little while, and we'll see what God says now, because my God can do this. I've got no problem. And then after a bit, he came back and he came to the king. And he said, you've asked this. It is impossible. You had the brightest and the best of Babylon in here, and you've asked them to do something they can in no way do. And then he says this, Daniel 2:28, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Oh, the mysteries we face. Why? How? Oh, I think this is impossible. I'm being asked the impossible here. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. God had revealed that mystery to Daniel. Daniel told the king what his dream was, and then he told him what it meant. And the king made Daniel the head over the province of Babylon in his administration. And he made the friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he made them rulers out in the land. God had stepped into a situation where they were being asked the impossible, made it all plain, made the way ahead plain and clear, because they trusted him and stepped out, looking to God to resolve it. And the key, Daniel 2:28. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. There is so much in this world we don't grasp, don't understand, and can't deal with. It's beyond us, it's impossible for us. But, you know, Daniel's got a lesson to teach us. And that's my word for the week. Those big questions, those big queries, those impossibilities that you're being asked to perform. How are we going to do this? Why? There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And very often he does it when it seems like the executioner has already been knocking on the door and there's no way out. Until you push that door. Act faithfully. And walk in trust in the God who reveals mysteries. Daniel 2:28. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. That's my word for the week. God bless you. Have a great week.